This is Teacher on the Radio in Cookeville, Tennessee. I'm Andrew, but my friend Chris knows me as Sun Frog from the old days in activism. Last time I saw him, probably we were in Columbus, Georgia, somewhere like that, marching against the School of the Americas, or maybe I saw him in the Bay Area. But Chris is a Louisville, Kentucky-based activist and author, and he's joining me today on a pre-recorded edition of Teacher on the Radio that we are dedicating to our friend, baker, activist, publisher, author, all-around amazing human, Jen Angel, who died tragically from injuries sustained after an assault in Oakland, California, which is her home. And we join our friends all over North America and all over the world who are celebrating her life but grieving its untimely end just a few days ago. Chris, welcome to Teacher on the Radio.
Yeah, it's great to be here with you.
Why don't you tell us just a little bit about who you are and how you knew Jen Angel, and just tell us a little bit about your relationship and your friendship with her as an activist, and in all the ways that we knew her. I'll say my part during the rest of the show, since you only have a few minutes today. So Chris Crass is joining us from Louisville, Kentucky, where he's a dad and a full-time activist, and he's been in this as long as anybody I know. So we've known Jen for decades, not just minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so I came into, social justice activism in a similar way, to you and to Jen through, punk rock activist, economic, racial, gender justice values, collective liberation, anarchist, socialist, youth culture. And, through the decades, I've really committed myself to how do we build up powerful, multiracial, democratic movements for economic, racial, gender justice? How do we bring communities together? How do we build power? And in particular, I've focused on doing anti-racist work in white communities as a way of really trying to break the stranglehold of white supremacy that tries to keep white communities connected to an economic agenda that is one of misery and injustice and violence. And so how to break white communities away from white supremacy and to join in the multiracial democratic struggle for economic justice, for a healthy democratic society, for a society in which there's dignity for all. And so I came into relationship with Jen Angel in the early 2000s when there was an explosion of powerful social justice organizing all over the world around economic justice, around trying to really advance what does it look like to have economies that prioritize human dignity and the health of communities over profit and authoritarian ruling class power? And so I met Jen in 2000 as the time of this global justice movement was really just taking off, meaning that tens and tens of thousands of people were joining in movement, protests, actions happening, organizations forming. And I came into contact with Jen Angel, and she was just, from then and onwards, and even before, she's just someone who is deeply committed to creating opportunities, support, infrastructure for lots of people to be a part of positive social justice communities, efforts, networks. So whether that was her lifelong commitment to independent media and creating platforms in print media, digital media for lots of different voices that are excluded from mainstream capitalist media, to help those voices get amplified, to be heard, encouraging people to become writers, encouraging people to become journalists. So she had a lifelong commitment to independent media, but she also was deeply committed to creating gatherings, conferences, music festivals where people could come together, meet each other, form relationships, experience community, get exposure to positive social justice, anarchist, socialist ideas and values. And then through these kinds of gatherings, whether it was anarchist book fairs in the San Francisco Bay Area where 3,000-4,000 people would be attending, whether it was the early zine festivals in the Midwest that then evolved in the 2000s and on into this really incredible allied media conference that then moved to Detroit, that continues to this day to be one of the most creative, dynamic annual gatherings in North America, where people come together, not just to present information, but to create new ways of understanding the world, new ways of helping to create positive change in the world. So Jen has done these remarkable things around independent media, alternative social justice, gathering, and infrastructure. And what I mean by infrastructure is Jen had this, Jen and I really bonded in our friendship around this concept of good ideas or good analysis is not enough. We need to have ways that people can get involved. We need to have ways that people can get support to stay involved. We need to have ways for people to grow their leadership, have their hearts and souls and minds nourished for the long haul. That it's not just about good ideas about what we want to see change in the world. We have to build power through organizations, institutions, and relationships and community, build liberatory power that can advance our goals and values, defeat right-wing legislation like anti-trans, anti-queer legislation, defeat legislation that's trying to destroy, Black history being taught in our schools. That we have to build liberatory power, not just have ideas about what we want to see different or what we don't like, but we have to actually create community, organizations, campaigns, media, different institutions that allow us to thrive in the here and now and make the kinds of structural systemic changes we need in the world. For example, if we had had a society in which basic economic, political, human rights were at the center of what is valued in our society, I don't think Jen Angel would have been killed in a robbery where people out of economic desperation are trying to survive, trying to make their way, trying to, steal resources. I think if we had had a democratic society where human rights were truly valued, we wouldn't have the crime and the violence out of desperation that we see around us that took Jen's life.
This is Teacher on the Radio. My guest is Chris Crass out of Louisville, Kentucky. And if you thought I was passionate when I sometimes go on my Saturday morning radio rants, you ain't seen nothing like this commitment and this passion. And I remember, Chris, in the late 90s, when I first started hearing some of this kind of language that you're using here around organizing, my anti-authoritarian side leaned a little bit more, maybe a little slightly more individualist or maybe more esoteric. They even had a nickname for people like me back in the 90s. They called us lifestyle anarchists. But you have managed to integrate yourself into democratic movements that are not necessarily always what we would call anti-authoritarian, or the banner doesn't have a circle A on it necessarily in every march that you attend. But I would say that the anti-authoritarian values that you and I and Jen all share really are infused into these kind of these contexts, because it influences how we interact with our colleagues. And I think it prevents burnout. It prevents kind of that vacuum where people get into leadership roles and they get kind of like sucked, the life sucked out of them, and then they get called to the carpet, because they didn't the deliverables weren't met, and they feel like they've been blamed or scapegoated. But we've only got a couple of minutes left. Did you ever get to before your next call? And I'm going to drop this online today, and then on Saturday on Teacher on the Radio on February the 18th. So did you ever get to go and have a cupcake in Oakland?
I actually never did. I had moved to Tennessee and then Kentucky before she opened her bakery, and I always wanted to, but it was so awesome to see her thrive in that way. But just to your point about this thing around being able to work with lots of different kinds of people, that was something that Jen was incredible at. She didn't get caught up in like, well, you said this, or you believe that, or, well, like the fine point of what kind of a disagreement we might have. She really had this kindness and care for people as humans, as just people that are in this world. She really loved and cared about people. And then she just really believed that rather than arguing with each other or getting into like, you have to agree with me, you know, whatever, that through coming together, through creating opportunities for meaningful discussion, debate, meaningful engagement, like with how do we think about the world? What do we want to see change? She was more concerned about how do we bring thousands and thousands of people together to develop their ideas, get involved, be a part of historic justice movements. I mean, from the global justice movement through Occupy, through Black Lives Matter, through the Me Too movement, through the uprisings against Trump and against the right-wing administration, to queer and trans liberation movements and feminist movements that continue to reshape our society today. Jen was about how do we create scale of organization, gathering, infrastructure, media that supports all of that to function, thrive, be successful, be powerful, and make the changes that we want to see. So Jen was like somebody that was like, I believe in the hearts and souls of humanity, and I don't necessarily need to have a conversation with everyone to see if I disagree or not with them. I just care about people, and I believe that if people were given the opportunities to choose a healthy, human rights focused democratic society where economic justice and dignity of all people was at the heart of that society, I think people would choose that over the death culture of white supremacist capitalist patriarchy. And so I think Jen was like, how do we create mass opportunities for people to be on the right side of history and focus on the tens of thousands of people that want to be a part of these justice movements, but just need entry points, need the invitation, need the welcoming face that is saying, I'm so glad you're here. So the reason that there are literally tens of thousands, if not more, people mourning her death all over the world, all over North America, is because she was a welcoming, loving, I'm so happy you're here person who created opportunities for so many of us to find our voices, find our communities, find our purposes, find organizations. And that's just who Jen was.
My name is Sun Frog Andrew Smith, teacher on the radio. My neighbor, my sibling from Louisville, Kentucky, we celebrate our sibling, our sister, our colleague and comrade, Jen Angel, for heaven is the beloved community. It is the autonomous zone. It is the new world in the shell of the old. And she is with all of the ancestors of our movements right now, looking back to help us remember her properly. Chris Crass has another call to get to, but he's been a guest today on Teacher on the Radio. I hate that it took our shared grief around losing Jen for me to get you on my podcast here today, sir. But we've already got some things in the works to hopefully bring you to Cookeville, Tennessee, where this radio show is based and where our community is crying out on exactly all of the things that we talked about. And we need to be very fiercely ready to dig in, to fight for that loving, welcoming community in a culture of hate that surrounds us. Chris Crass, I'm going to put a virtual fist bump up here. Let me see that fist.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And even what you just said, even in death, Jen Angel continues to bring people together.
That's right.
That's what her life was. And that's why her passing, people are coming together. People are connecting. People are saying, you know what? I may not have seen you in 20, 30 years, but I love you and I care about you. And we're still in this together. That's Jen Angel's legacy.
All right. Chris Crass, teacher on the radio. Thank you all so much for listening in today.